Three. Hi, welcome to another episode of Unscripted with your host, Mikey.
And Danny,
Yep.
I
Hi. Yeah, we're just gonna yap a little bit about anything and
yes.
everything. So yeah, how's life been for the past couple weeks as the weather is getting a bit colder? What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been good. Things are little bit for me, work-wise, things get a little bit busier before the November and December holidays. So,
Mhm.
um, just, keeping things in order, making sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's in the realm of work. Um, But yeah, otherwise pretty good. I actually just took a transcendental meditation class this
Oh,
weekend.
tell me about
Yeah,
that. What did you do and what did you
that
experience?
was it was an interesting class. It was taught by this she's very good. I like her, this instructor that yeah, it's the way it's structured, it's a four class session. The
Mm,
first class is a one-on-one session, the second class is a group session. The third and fourth classes are effectively group gatherings to meditate
mhm,
and talk about meditation. Um, I definitely need a lot more of mindfulness in my life. I kind of confessed to the instructor my first day, like I just feel like sometimes,
mm,
it feels like your environment is dictating your actions more so than you yourself. Like you don't feel like you have a lot of agency. And I told her, I was thinking about these themes in my life where, I've been working for 10 years and I've climbed the corporate ladder. I'm at a place, where I have a little bit more control over kind of my projects and my work in relations to others on my team.
mhm,
But there's also a lot more responsibility, and the nature of work is less quantitative and
mhm,
more so there's more of a qualitative shift where how the work is facilitated, how the projects are structured, how they're executed matters quite a lot more in terms of like
mhm,
performance than the end result perhaps.
mhm.
And so I guess just thinking about these factors, the complexity of navigating these environments, the pressures that they place on an individual kind of needing to use both left and right brains to navigate, um, uh, you know, like the role that I'm currently in, the projects, the responsibilities. It, it creates a lot of stress and, potential for burnout. So
Mhm.
I think having the ability, having tools to better help um, create more of a sense of calmness and sense of agency, I think is also important. Um,
Mm.
there's a session that we had today that talked about um, there's an interesting quote. I can't remember the exact words, but it was like the moment before a stimulus and your response, that's kind of where our free will, our agency lies. And um,
Mm.
it's about widening that moment, that like gap between stimulus and action.
Mm.
That really makes a big difference.
Mm.
And yeah, I thought that was quite nice.
Yeah,
Bit of takeaway.
for sure. I would imagine, I guess on the topic of like stimulus and response, do you think that there's like an optimal amount of a gap or like an optimal amount of time in between? Because, for example, if you have like a stimulus and then you wait a little bit too long before you respond, then it's like there's like a huge kind of like disconnect, right? But then it's like,
I guess it, yeah, yeah. I guess it
Mhm.
varies with um, every kind of, each scenario, each stimulus.
Mm.
It just varies. It depends. Um, but I think it's important to have like a healthy, we talked about the prefrontal cortex a lot, and
Mhm.
I think it is important to have to be in a healthy to try to be in a healthy brain state where your
Mm,
prefrontal cortex is always activated and being engaged. I think a lot of times, um, whether it's due to like stress or anxiety or lack of
mm,
sleep
mm,
or some unoptimal set of unoptimal suboptimal conditions, we kind of just respond. We don't really think,
mm,
or we don't really engage our prefrontal cortex as much.
mhm,
So I think I think the practice of mindfulness
mm,
and various forms of self-care
mhm,
that includes meditation and also diet and sleep and exercise. I think that all helps to kind of strengthen and support prefrontal cortex level thinking. And I
mhm.
think having that is a really important prerequisite for responding to our environment, having a sense of agency that I feel like sometimes I lack.
No, for sure. Like I hear you on that because I don't know. I feel like speaking of the prefrontal cortex, I think it's one of those parts of your brain that is responsible for making decisions and like executing and taking action. And I think that part of the brain can kind of be really worn down when you have all of these other kind of like stimuli activating like the other parts of your brain that keep you in like a fear and like stress-based like mode. And I think like yeah, finding that sense of balance and I think meditation is a great way to like restore that is really helpful, I think, in a lot of ways. And this is also something that I've also been trying to incorporate into, I guess, like my day-to-day life. Uh,
Mm,
I don't know if you've heard of, I guess like, do you know like Dr. K slash like healthy gamer on YouTube? Maybe you've heard of him.
mm.
He talks a lot
No.
about mental health and like, I guess like gaming addiction, which is not something that I personally have, but I just find a lot of his content to be really interesting. And he also has, I guess, like kind of like a meditation slash like, I don't know, meditation slash psychiatry course, like online that I guess like I had subscribed to like a really long time ago. But I
Mm,
rediscovered it and I started doing some of like his meditations. And they were, really interesting and helpful for kind of like being more sensitive and in tune to a lot of the subtleties. For example, in my own kind of like breathing or like the where like my muscles are like relaxed and whatnot. Like you pay like more attention to that instead of like I don't know. I think meditation is a great way to direct where I guess like your attention goes. Um, but yeah, so
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
We also talked about the flow state a lot during our class.
Mm,
Well, at least during my one-on-one.
mm,
And the idea is that we're always chasing that flow state. And I think to your
yeah.
point about like gaming in particular, when you're
Hmm.
playing a video game, I mean, ideally you're in a flow state. And I think, that feeling is really addictive.
Hmm.
Um, and for a lot of people, I think it's really easy to get into a float state when playing a video game
Mm,
versus, sitting down a pile of work and having to go through
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so I think an interesting takeaway, I think, is like from transcendental meditation is like, you're like by creating that moment of meditation, you want to ideally prime your body, prime your mind to go into a flow state right afterwards. So
Hmm.
there's a recommendation, for example, that you shouldn't do a meditation before bed. That's really not as optimal. It should
Mm,
really be once in the morning and then once in the evening before you engage in some other activity, whether it's like, after work, going back home and kind of,
mm,
being with your family, spending time with your family, cooking dinner maybe,
mm, mm,
or in the morning, like before work, before you get to work,
mm,
or during the middle of the day, before
yeah,
the afternoon kind of
yeah.
work cycle begins.
Hmm.
So I like that idea. I like the idea of kind of priming your brain to kind of enter in flow state, so that because it is quite. I do have to say when I'm working and I feel like I'm in a state of flow. The work
Hmm.
is a lot more enjoyable
Yeah.
when I'm working and I feel so distracted and there's like many different things that are going through my mind that you're kind of thinking through. It's not so automatic and
Hmm.
streamlined as otherwise it could be.
Right. Right. But yeah, to I guess like I wanted to touch on multiple points when you talk about flow state. I think that also connects to how kind of social media is designed to keep you in like especially like reels, like they keep you in a consistent, like a constant stream of like stimuli, which kind of keeps you locked in to this kind of like quasi like flow state. But I think different types of flow is, can be healthier or like less healthy for you. For example, like I guess like when I'm like scrolling on YouTube Shorts, it's like I notice that there's no gap in the amount of noise like in between like each video. And I think it's like really interesting how I guess like these algorithms are designed such that like, it preloads like a couple videos like that it predicts that you want to watch. And then like in between like that preloaded like video, there's like no space for you to pause. It's just like a constant stream of noise. And I think that, is intentional in terms of like design to keep people engaged on that platform. But I also think that, it requires a certain amount of self-discipline and also responsibility from, I guess, the people who design these platforms to kind of be mindful of, I guess, how technology like this can be abused. Um, that is one thought that I had regarding, I guess, like both video games, but also social media use. And also, like,
Yeah.
speaking of flow, I think it also ties into like different ways that people manage and use it. For example, like, I don't know, like if you're addicted to something, like, I don't know, some people can be addicted to exercise, some people can be addicted to like eating like an enormous amount of food or like not eating at all. Like there's so many different types of, I guess, like escapism or coping mechanisms that induce this so-called state of flow that, can, if managed improperly, can cause one to harm oneself. Um, so I think yeah, these are some of the thoughts that I've had like more broadly regarding, I guess, flow. But it also comes with, like if you're aware, like
Mm.
with your entire body, with how you're engaging in, I guess, like the types of flow like you are going through throughout the day, I think that, gives you a little more autonomy and control over what place it has in your life. So, yeah.
Yeah, the term mindfulness really
Mhm.
is something that I think about a lot. It's like it's going back to my whole point of like, sometimes I feel like kind of the external stimuli, the environment itself is kind of like
Mhm.
controlling me versus me controlling it. Like
Right.
I'm at the whims of other people and what they're kind of seeking and what the environment is telling me that I should do.
Hmm.
But I think, just being able to have a couple minutes of
Hmm.
peace to
Yeah.
think about how do I be more intentional? How do I be more kind of in the present?
Hmm.
I think that's really important. Yeah, and it's hard to achieve, really. I think I'm also like pretty habituated. I think like the thing about kind of building habits, like being habituated and building habits and having like a very structured kind of life is that you kind of get used to things, and so
Mm.
maybe it's a little bit more difficult to kind of be in the moment to kind of be more intentional.
Mm.
But um but I think we should all create space to kind of
Yeah.
think and reflect. Yeah. And I think also just like having the option, having the certain anchors. I really like my instructor, and I do want to, maybe not every week, but every couple of weeks, come back to her just to have like a session.
Hmm.
I think that could be really beneficial.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I think, on the topic of meditation as well, like you mentioned, like it's good to kind of start it in the morning or maybe like in the middle of your workday or like just before like an evening activity. I think the one time that I find it to be the most helpful is like kind of like during my lunch break, in between kind of like so I can just take a break and create that space that I need to recollect myself. Um,
Mm,
I
for
lately have
sure.
been practicing. I don't know if you've heard of like Nadi Shuddhi, which is like kind of like you alternate nostril
Yeah.
breathing.
Oh.
It's like a breathing technique that allows you to balance, I guess, like the left and right hemispheres of your mind. I guess like I don't know how like true it is like from a neuroscience standpoint, but it's like I like to think that
Mm,
I am more balanced and I do feel more balanced by the end of it. But sometimes with meditation, I feel like it's hard to tell like is it placebo or am I actually do I actually feel like better because of it? So that is something that
mm,
I think about sometimes as well. But what I also noticed
yeah.
um, from meditating lately is that sometimes like when I get super into it, like my stomach and my hands will start to like vibrate and like tingle. I don't know if that's just bad
Mm,
circulation, but it could also be like I feel like this, I don't know, really intense like energy like running through my stomach and my hands. So,
yeah. I mean, our instructor talked about that. Like, yeah, like she's
mhm.
like, oh yeah, you could feel a little bit of tingling, a little bit of
Yeah.
numbness, a little bit of like discombobulation. And
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really felt that quite
Uh-huh.
yet. I mean, I feel calm, which is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But like I told her, I feel like, I'm not quite, I think she drew like an oscillating function
Mm.
to help kind of understand like, you're at the higher level of consciousness and then you kind of like try to like the idea is like you dive deeper and then you go
Mm.
up and so like I think for me it's not but also the takeaway was like you shouldn't this is like you're not trying to measure it or trying to like think of it as a goal. It's just kind of
Mhm.
sitting with this idea.
Mm.
Um
Mm.
I thought was also kind of it's something that I kind of felt like I knew about
Yeah.
meditation. It's like it's not you don't want to think of it as like a goal, as like
Right.
a target. You're trying to hit a
Mm.
specific kind of objective or outcome.
Mm.
It kind of defeats the purpose.
Right.
So,
Mm. Yeah.
but I think I'm kind of so wired to think about it in those terms that it's hard to like maybe um, it's hard to just kind of sit with it sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
No.
yeah, that's like something that I want to
Mhm.
work on.
I would say the same for me too. It's like, like I have a goal of like practicing meditation kind of like every single day, like at work or kind of like before, I don't know, like yeah, just like opening up a couple minutes every day just to meditate. But it's like I don't want to see it as like a goal as much as like you said, like kind of a state of mind where you learn to just like accept everything and be aware of what you're feeling. Um, but then it can also be nested inside of this like, okay, like I want to do this in order to get here. But that's not kind of like the point. Like the point is to just create this time to just feel and be. Um, but yeah. No,
Mm.
yeah. So
There's definitely a lot there too. I mean, I think there's like it's kind of like there's a scientific kind of element to it. It's like, okay, what aspects of your brain are
mm,
you activating or are you slowing down the activity during meditation?
mm,
That I kind of am so curious about. But I think there's also maybe like a philosophical element of it. It's like
yeah.
we talked about in our class, this core of being
Mm,
that then kind of resonates. And like, I think the core philosophy behind transcendental meditation is like, you have this core being
hmm
that sends up ideas into the surface consciousness level.
mm,
And the idea of meditation is kind of calming and sort of diving towards that core of being,
mm,
kind of like a deep sea diver. Um,
mm,
so I'm curious. I'm like so curious to learn more, and certainly I'll do a little bit of researching. But it's interesting how there's a kind of like a philosophy behind it of like how people think
hmm
really of what consciousness is and um,
yeah. Yeah.
what is beneficial for it or
Mm,
not beneficial. So there's
hmm
um, some interesting topics of conversation there.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really fascinating concept of like you diving deeper into this so-called core being. It's like what I'm imagining in my head is like kind of like this really, really dark, like vast space, and you're kind of like diving blind, like trying to find and dig out kind of like what this core being is, or kind of like just to feel it, and
It's
bring
like
that.
the levels of consciousness. I think that's fascinating to me. I mean,
Mm,
like, you have the sort of conscious and then
mhm,
the subconscious and then deeper levels of subconscious. And then
mhm,
beneath that is kind of like under that is like your core being.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm, mm.
yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah,
Like what is this core being? Like,
yeah.
what is it that, is it consistent between one, is it the same thing between one person and another? Is it like very
Mm,
different? Like
mm, mm.
just kind of curious what that all is about.
Yeah, no, for sure. What even is consciousness? That's a whole other can of worms, but it's like, yeah.
It is a whole can of worms. Yeah. Yeah. What is
Um,
consciousness?
yeah, yeah. I was having a conversation about consciousness with one of my friends yesterday, and we talked about like, well, what's the difference between kind of like being dead and being unconscious? Like, are they functionally the same? Like, because in one sense, like,
Yeah, are they?
if you're unconscious, you at least have the ability to become conscious again. But who says that if you're dead, like, you're like permanently not going to be conscious? And then it dives into like the idea
Yeah.
when we eat food, like that food was once conscious and alive, and then now it's like dead in the state that is food, and then we're eating it and we're giving new life to the food, and it's like, whoa, so that
Wait, hold
food,
on.
yeah.
Hold on. Is are vegetables conscious?
Or maybe not like conscious the same way that we are, but I think conscious in the sense of like they have cells. They're made of like, the basic building blocks of life, and they can sense light, and they, can sense when it's cold. They can like, like in the same way that, when we're kind of sleepy and we're not really all that conscious, but we have like a very like rudimentary like level of sense. Like we can sense like, oh, like is it warm? Is it cold? Like at a very basic level without having all of these kind of deeper or more complex sensations. I think plants, like to a certain extent, they know when it's sunny, they know when they're getting enough water, they have some sort of sense. I don't think they're conscious in the same way that we are, but it's also like, well, when we chop them up like as like vegetables and we consume them, we take the energy that they produced and then we convert them into our form, or like we reorganize their consciousness into like our consciousness. Um,
But when you are unconscious, as you said earlier,
mhm.
are you kind of like in the same level of consciousness as like a plant,
For,
effectively?
Potentially. I mean, like, nobody can really say like for certain, but theoretically speaking, in my head, I guess so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know. I guess for me, like I don't think plants are conscious.
mhm.
Um, I don't feel like they have agency, the same way that like I guess living things do. But
Mm.
but yeah, it's a good question. It's a
Yeah,
good question.
yeah. I
I think a lot
mean,
of vegans might say that plants are probably not conscious.
okay. I mean, like, well, consciousness is a hard thing to kind of talk about because there's no like c consistent definition, but it's like,
Oh, that's true.
right? So I think like because of that, it's hard to really like have to calibrate like like the conversation to what it actually is, but yeah.
Yeah.
um but what I was also going to add was that like if you're kind of like not alive and you're kind of dead and some other animal like eats you, um like you yourself are not conscious, but the animal like has absorbed a part of your kind of like conscious like energy and like reorganized it into, I guess, like whatever their consciousness is, right? Um, so I don't know. I think, you know,
Does that work that way though? Could consciousness be transferred from one being to another, or, is it just another being um kind of absorbing the nutrients or the like the just the rearranging the atoms, of
yeah.
another
Well,
source into the source that they
yeah, I don't think that the consciousness itself is preserved, so to speak, or like the memory of like that. existing being is preserved. I think like, there's a disconnect between the organization of the dead being and the being that absorbed the nutrients. But I think that reorganization
Mhm.
process like took some like atoms that were once conscious in another being and then made it like conscious in another being like in a different way. Like, yeah.
Interesting. And it's interesting that
Yeah.
you say the consciousness is associated, like attached to the atoms somehow. But I don't know. I
Somehow.
wonder if it's,
Yeah. Or it's like
yeah,
not, or maybe it's the specific organization of the atoms um, that create this
maybe.
consciousness. Yeah. Yeah. So,
We need to invite a neurologist, neurophysicist,
neuroscientist,
neuro something.
neuroscientist, or I don't know, somebody who's thought really deeply
A
about
neuro
this.
specialist.
Yeah.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
That would be really interesting. Um,
Yes. Okay, let's wrap it up.
yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening to our little yap session. I didn't expect it to get this deep, but here we are. Um,
It's fun. No, it's fun to talk
yeah,
about these things.
no, for sure. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah, continue to practice meditation if you already are, if this is something that you value and find, meaningful and important in your life. But yeah, anyway, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for listening.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.